Whatever skill you learn, whatever field you want to advance in, you need to constantly reprogram the way your brain works. Whatever you teach it to focus on, it will learn to pay attention to that subject faster, clearer, and more automatically. Whatever you consistently direct your attention to strengthens not only mentally, but also neurally. Because the brain marks recurring points of focus as important and creates new pathways that make them easier to perceive. You can see this in its simplest form when learning to drive a car. Initially, it requires intense consciousness. You only think about pressing the pedals, turning the steering wheel, checking the mirrors, and following the tactic. Your mind is constantly alert because the brain is still showing what information is being recorded. But over time, these pieces combine, become automatic, and you begin to apply the correct responses without even realizing it. It's not the road that changes, but how your brain processes it. The same process applies to the entirety of focusing and framing. You cannot perceive which signals are present linearly. It's difficult to discern which sensations are important and which are relegated to the background. Subtle differences may seem elegant, indistinct, or meaningless. However, with practice, these broader distinctions, your brain learns to recognize new patterns, begins to highlight information it previously ignored, and perception becomes progressively clearer. By maintaining this through focused attention, you allow your brain to notice patterns it normally filters out. This isn't about creating something that doesn't exist. It's about revealing details that have always been there. It's like increasing the contrast of a photograph. The details were there from the beginning, but they become distinguishable when the adjustment changes. Now imagine you're focusing solely on your hands. Without interrupting the movement, without trying to do anything, just direct your attention there. After a while, you might perceive manipulation, warmth, a slight pulse, or a vague but discernible vitality. These sensations aren't new. They've been there before. Your mind simply flagged them as unimportant. The brain converts only a small fraction of the enormous amount of information from the environment into stored experience. Everything else is filtered. Once you begin to understand how these filters work, even the fluidity of reality becomes imperceptible. The breadth of differences found is a failure to see what isn't there. The important thing is to learn to select what is already there. The perception matrix is not static. It is constantly reshaped by what you learn, your repetitions, and your experiences. Focusing reminds your brain of what matters. From time to time, new connections are made between these signals, and the general elements of previous efforts become natural. You can liken this process to learning a new language. Initially, the distinction is like a meaningless jumble of sounds. Then you begin to separate words, then sentences, and finally, when you want, the emphasis and hidden meanings. The sounds are fixed. This is a disruption of your brain's order. The sounds felt during different studies are not actually new. They are part of normal sensory input. What changes is how your brain organizes, stores, and presents this information to the mind. Only in this way is it possible for two people applying the same method to have completely different experiences. There is no right or wrong here. There are simply different ways of perceiving. By adjusting how your brain filters information, you learn to learn this system for yourself, not against you. As you progress, you can integrate your natural perceptual patterns more efficiently, renewably, and with less effort. Because everything learned becomes part of your perceptual matrix, and new experiences contribute to your brain, creating shorter, more effective pathways. In conclusion, each step modifies the next. The perceptual matrix is the foundation of this entire process. When the pieces work together harmoniously, learning accelerates, experiences evolve, and deepen indefinitely. Now, building on this foundation, you continue to explore how this flexible perceptual structure connects to larger layers of reality. Because true transformation begins where the focus of attention remains constant. The rules of everyday life lead us to believe that reality is rigid, singular, and fixed. We assume that an object is either here or there, that an event or situation has occurred. However, at the smallest level of reality, this perception of certainty begins to dissolve and disappear, and it turns out that it is only valid on a large scale. At the quantum level, something can exist in more than one state at the same time. The connection can be changed instantly, regardless of the distance between them, and even the act of looking at something, observing it, can directly influence that behavior. These are not bizarre ideas from science fiction. They are completely tested facts that show how the most fundamental processes of nature occur. To make this clearer, let's take a simple example. A coin. In our everyday world, when a coin is spun on a table, the result is obvious, either heads or tails. Nothing else can happen. But in the quantum world, the situation is completely different. On a computer, it can behave as both heads and tails at the same time until it is measured. Scientists call this superposition. That is, a system carries more than one possibility at the same time until one is chosen. But this does not mean can. This actually means they exist simultaneously. This shows that quantum mechanics is not just a theoretical, abstract, or practical survival field. Because many technologies useful today are directly resistant to quantum effects. The processors in our phones work thanks to the quantum evolution of electrons. GPS satellites need quantum corrections to accurately program their positions. Even in the process of photosynthesis, the conversion of sunlight into energy is possible thanks to quantum particles. Therefore, the quantum world has been present in our lives much longer than we think. One of the most striking aspects of quantum physics is the phenomenon known as entanglement. Once it occurs between two people, it continues in the other the moment one leaves, no matter how great the distance between them. This is an instantaneous effect, and there is no exchange of signals between them. Einstein called it the spatial effect because it seemed to contradict the classical physics rule that nothing is safe from light. However, the question of whether this connection is real still remains valid. Even more surprising is that the quantum world is not limited to atoms and events. Scientists have managed to put visible objects into quantum states. Tiny mirrors, pieces of metal, and even living features have been brought into a state of superposition at certain dimensions. These developments reveal that the line between the quantum world and the everyday world is not as sharp as we thought. All this inevitably raises the question of what reality is. If something is not in a certain state until it is observed, is it real? If a state can exist in two places at once, and we don't know this until we look at it, is reality independent of our perception? Or does it take shape together with our perception? These questions lead us to question not only physics, but also the nature of existence. At this point, Some scientists continue to suggest that quantum mechanics may play a role not only in the unimaginable aspects of consciousness, but in its entirety. The idea has been put forward that quantum expansion occurring in the brain system could affect thinking, feeling, and the universal explanation of events. This topic is still ongoing, and there is no definitive answer, but the possible link between quantum physics and consciousness suggests that reality may be far deeper and more complex than we imagine. The mathematics of quantum mechanics works flawlessly. It yields results perfectly consistent with examples. However, there is no complete consensus on what this mathematician meant. Some argue that the complexity of every possibility indicates the existence of parallel universes, while others believe it is a reality shaped by observation. The only thing certain is that the quantum world is not simple, monocentric, and absolutely indivisible for us. All the rules we're used to in daily life seem so clear. Something either exists or doesn't. An event either happens or doesn't. A cause always produces an effect, and time always seems to flow correctly. But at the deepest level, when you look at the changes occurring in the smallest building blocks of reality, this certainty is irrelevant. We don't live in an unsolvable and rigid universe as we imagine. It may seem strange to even think about it, but at the quantum level, something can be in more than one state at the same time. Just as a coin spinning on a table can be neither heads nor tails until it's measured, quantum abundance contains far more possibilities than are observed simultaneously, and scientists call this superposition. They list far more possibilities than we can imagine. This isn't just a theoretical or trivial discussion, because today, everything from the processors in the phones we carry in our pockets to the GPS satellites that track our location with meters of precision, and even the way sunlight is converted into energy is recorded in quantum form. And this strange but incredibly efficient system is maintained according to established rules and continues as it is in the quantum world without us even realizing it. One of the most unsettling aspects of quantum physics is the visible connections that can be developed. Within two contexts, regardless of the distance between them, an effect from one causes an instantaneous change in the other, presenting a reality that challenges the understanding of classical physics, even as disturbing as what Einstein described as a distant effect. Even more surprising is that this effect is not limited to subatomic particles. Scientists have now managed to integrate quantum capacities into tiny mirrors, small pieces of metal, and even living features, clearly demonstrating that there is a much thinner line between quantum mechanics and everyday life than we thought. At this point, we inevitably face the question: if something is not in a certain state until it is observed, does it truly exist? Or is it merely a possibility until we look at it? If it can be in two places at once, and we can only understand this when we observe it, how objective, how similar are the concepts we call reality? This is precisely where quantum physics and the concept of consciousness begin to intertwine. Some scientists argue that our consciousness is not merely a passive observer, but rather plays an active role in demonstrating reality through observation, while others argue that all possibilities already exist, and we are merely defending the experience of an Austrian individual. Interestingly, these very different perspectives are entirely consistent with the same performance equations. This situation presents us with the characteristic of multiple possible realities instead of a single certain reality. Interpretations that speak of parallel universes, Methods that argue that reality is shaped by the choices of consciousness all stem from this. But whichever is correct, it shows us that in the quantum world, the universe has a much more interconnected structure than it currently appears. The fact that the void we perceive is not actually empty, but rather filled with virtual environments constantly interfering with existence, that everything affects everything else, and that the observed cannot be completely separated from the observed, means that we are not alone, but rather everything is part of a whole. This perspective may even be questioned at times. In the quantum world, cause and effect do not always lead to the progression we are accustomed to. In some experiments, effects appear before they manifest. There is even a history of events, and time does not appear as a rigid line as we imagine. All this may seem strange, even unsettling, but these ideas are not just thought experiments. Quantum theory initiates every test, validates itself in every experiment, and unlike these strange places, scientists continue to understand and control it better every day. Today, quantum computers can solve certain problems much faster than classical computers. Quantum cryptography offers virtually unbreakable security systems, and quantum senses can detect even the smallest changes in records, magnetic fields, and time. In other words, the quantum world is no longer just a subject for physics laboratories. It is becoming an integral part of science, biology, and computing. And perhaps what is ultimately happening is this: the quantum world reminds us that reality is not as separate, rigid, and static as we thought. Rather, it is a living structure shaped by observation, creation, and connection. And because we are a large entity, we often differ in these subtleties. We are in a far more interesting reality than we imagined, because the quantum world offers us silent but powerful ways to unravel not only the strange behaviors of subatomic matter, but indeed everything, the most fundamental properties of existence. And as we begin to notice these clues, we begin to see that the universe is far more mysterious, far more vibrant, and far more luminous than we thought. Understanding quantum physics is more like learning to listen to the universe than to control it, because one of the most important truths presented here is that the observed and the observed are inseparable. And this, beyond a scientific principle, forms the key to how we experience reality. The act of observation is not as innocent as we think. The moment we look at something, we see it not as it is, but also with our own attention, expectations, and consciousness. And our experiences and the quantum world clearly show us this. To observe is to change. We don't need complex elements to connect this. A child playing alone. The same principle applies to the smallest building blocks of the universe. When perceiving a quantum particle, the measurement process changes the particle. Because even while we continue to see it as it is, we are actually exerting an influence on it. And this is similar to turning on a light to check a dark room. It doesn't need to see it, but the light affects it. This is where the radiation effect comes into play, manifesting not only in a physical principle, but also in the explosion of experience. Because when we direct our attention to a purpose, we are no longer just observing, but participating in the process, creating a visible bridge between our observation and what we are observing. This is not something to be feared. On the contrary, it provides a great area of reciprocity and responsibility, because when we understand the continuity of attention, we use it as a tool at home, inviting us to a more attentive, more focused, and more distant experience. For example, when you try to feel an energy in your hands, the moment you focus on that feeling, you are not only discovering something that already exists, but you are also contributing to the enhancement of that experience. Your expectations, attention, and intentions begin to shape what you feel. And this is not false or imaginary, but a natural part of quantum reality. This raises an important question. If everything changes when we look at our observations, then what is real? The answer may seem surprising at first glance, but it makes sense when you delve deeper. Everything we observe is real. It is simply shaped by our observation. This is similar to two people dancing together. One doesn't completely control the other, but moves them, influences their steps, and what emerges is an experience created together, not by a single person. Consider watching the flow of a day, the colors you see, your emotions, the images that awaken within you stem not only from the play of light in the sky, but also from your mood at that moment, your attention, and your ability to see, and therefore from the loss of that same day, from the freedom of extraordinary meanings for different people. The same is true for energy. When you are present, how your attention shapes your experience means you no longer emerge as a passive observer. Your peaceful observation nourishes that peace. Your synergy produces that power. And all this happens not just by watching, but by participating. The impact of this sustainability teaches us this. What we focus on becomes stronger, and therefore being clear about our intentions, knowing where we direct our attention, carries a great responsibility. Because we are aligning with reality, actively participating in it. When dealing with energy, we are both observing and becoming part of what is being observed. It's like being both the photographer and inside the photograph, and in practice, this means what you perceive is to hiss it, to realize how it is shaped by your expectations. Is it warmth or discomfort? Is it expected that there will be no interference? Your knowledge determines the direction of your experience, and this is entirely natural, as long as you are sure that this is known, because completely dismantling the quantum world shows us that completely objective observation is actually impossible. In every observation we make, in every detail we notice, and in everything we measure, our own consciousness is also involved. And perhaps the show we are witnessing begins right here, at that subtle point where the world we observe and the observing awareness move together in apparent harmony. Special supplement for listeners. Understanding the difference in synchronization. If you've heard this before, you might recall how you overcome events when coincidence is mentioned in certain behaviors, how you meet the right person at the right time, or how a sign follows a thought. Perhaps in the quantum world, the language of these events has been speaking to you for much longer than you realize. The key isn't complex techniques, but simply more careful observation, seeing intermittently instead of automatic reactions, and beginning to see the parts not as isolated fragments, but as reflections of a whole. Because sometimes, real change begins not when the external world becomes difficult, but when the way you perceive it begins to change. This process of renewal through energy work presents both a challenge and a unique opportunity. It may seem strange at first, because if you are partly responsible for the energy in your experience, it becomes a natural reflex to question how much you can trust it. But the answer is simple and practical. What matters is the magnitude of the experience and the impact of its results. not how much it corresponds to pure understanding, but to what extent it contributes to your growth, awareness, and healing. You can liken it to riding a bicycle. Initially, you worry about which movement you're doing correctly, but once you start moving, what matters is staying put and reaching where you want to work. Energy work is similar to this experience. The right steps are learned, but initially, what you need to focus on is participating in your own process and observing the results. Rather than perfect technique, your past experiences are one of the fundamental lessons the power of diffusion teaches us. Because we don't passively pass by, we actively participate in integrating it. And in this way, it makes our practice more effective when we encounter challenges. If we learn to change our natural influence instead of resisting, we can direct our attention like a tool, altering change with our observation and using this to store practical knowledge. This process isn't just about observing. The energy we focus on shapes itself by merging with our approach. This understanding prepares us for the next step, breaking old patterns and creating new possibilities. The illusion of a gap between observer and observed is shattered, and how we direct our attention reveals new details about the energy. Now, let's address an old misconception about how important it is to understand the software correctly. Most of us, while working, are protected from sudden events such as power outages caused by faulty wiring or the heat rising from a stove. When we flip a light switch, we think that electricity flows from the power plant to our house and the bulb lights up. This explanation makes sense because it matches what we see. However, in reality, this is a story we see to make sense of what is happening, and the truth is far more surprising. Energy doesn't go anywhere because it's already everywhere. Our observations and actions trigger chain reactions that transform energy states from one form to another. In fact, energy doesn't come from the power plant to your house. It just creates a disruption, and this disruption manifests itself in waves through space, just like it lights up your light bulb. Imagine this: a small event on a morning in New York. On a cold January morning, the rhythm of a woman's steps as she takes her coffee and goes for a run in Central Park causes other people to notice her energy. Amidst the grayness of the sky and the noise of the day, this woman's attention and intention is to shape not only her own experience, but also the experience of those around her. This example illustrates how the true state of affairs begins to emerge the moment you stop thinking of energy simply as something transferred from one place to another, and how your observations, even your awareness of the energy around you. When you actively distribute energy through contact instead of passively dissipating it, you see increases in the depth of experience for both yourself and your surroundings. In your observations, your breath, your conscious responses in the direction of these disturbances. We know that everything around us is actually composed of energies in different states. What we call matter is nothing more than a dense and stable form of energy. And this energy is constantly rearranging, changing shape, and interacting with its surroundings. Take heat, for example. In everyday language, we say, heat is rising, but heat is not an independent entity moving upwards. Rather, it is energy that radiates in search of equilibrium, interacting with the environment and with your own internal energy. The warmth you feel when you bring your hand close to a heat source is not actually something that passes directly from the source, but a result of the interaction of your own energy with the surrounding energy state. And this interaction varies depending on the molecular structure of the environment. This principle also applies to all other types of energy, such as sound, light, and electricity. For example, sound is experienced as a pressure pattern created by the movement of particles in the air. And light is not a flow from the sun toward us, but a fluctuation of the electromagnetic field that fills all of space. Electricity is not simply electrons moving along a wire, but vibrations of the energy field around the wire. Gravity should be understood similarly. It is not a mysterious force that attracts objects to each other, but the curvature of space-time and the pursuit of energy balance arising from this curvature. Consider water flowing down a hill. Its movement is determined not so much by the water itself, but by the energy difference between the high and low ground and the chemical interactions between molecules. This perspective allows us to conceive of energy not as something separate, but as an expression of the fundamental fabric of existence. Energy constantly rearranges itself within molecules, forms new bonds, flows, spreads, and transforms. Wherever you look, everything is shaped by energy, and this completely changes the way we understand the universe. Now let's relate this to the miracles of Jesus Christ. Instead of explaining his walking on water simply by adding something to the water or transferring energy, recognizing the interaction of the energy states of the water and the observed world with consciousness helps us understand the essence of this miracle. Using the power of observation and intention, Jesus changed the energy state of the environment he interacted with. Instead of disrupting the natural flow of water, he moved in harmony with it, transforming people's perception and experience. This example shows us that when working with energy, our goal is not simply to apply force, but to properly direct energy states and transform them in a beneficial way. We must stop thinking about energy within the framework of the old paradigm. Instead of trying to transfer it from one place to another, we must learn to work with it, observe its natural flow, and direct it as needed. Just as we consciously open and close dams to direct the flow of a river, working with energy is about creating results not by forcing it, but by moving in harmony with it. When we grasp the observer effect, we are no longer passive observers, but active creators. Just as Jesus consciously shaped both his own consciousness and the energy around him while walking on water, we too become a force that both observes and transforms energy. To understand why starting earlier is more economical, we need to grasp this. There's no need to isolate observers far away from us. We establish the same energy link and observe through measurement by directly interacting with this field. Therefore, what we measure is not an action independent of energy. It's an effect occurring in the energy data itself. This isn't just a theoretical thought. There's a practical example. Solar panels work more efficiently when designed according to changes in energy states rather than trying to capture light. Batteries last much longer when energy states are generated individually rather than forcibly moving their pupils. Even the simplest machines become more efficient at storing and releasing usable energy when we stop fighting against the natural patterns of energy and adapt to them. But it takes time to break free from old thinking, because we've become so accustomed to this illusion that it seems more real than reality itself. Once you begin to see energy as a single, holistic field of which it is a part, it's almost impossible to revert to the old perspective. The next time you see something moving or flowing, don't just focus on the apparent movement. you can uncover the energy within. Continuity exists in an interconnected field, quite different from its separate appearances. What's at stake here is how different parts of the same system influence each other. This perspective opens new doors for us to use energy more effectively rather than struggling with it. The real challenge isn't trying to move it from one place to another. It's creating the right conditions for the change in the usable energy state to occur. The idea of separate energies has limited us for far too long. When we break free from this, we begin to see ourselves as a single field of which we are all a part. This isn't just a different form of design. It's the key to using everything more effectively. The same is true for our minds. The brain is flexible. It changes and evolves. Science calls this neuroplasticity. New experiences create new pathways in the mind, and these pathways can replace old limiting patterns. The comfort zone isn't a prison cell, as is often thought. Each step taken expands the space a little more. The walls gradually erode, and what seemed possible becomes possible. However, it is crucial to pay attention to the moments when the mind struggles to rebuild these walls. It may dismiss success as luck, or, if successful, exaggerate it as too difficult. And don't think of this as an abstract idea. It is relevant to our time. Smartphones are the clearest example. We can carry them in our pockets, but this is only a superficial view of what is actually happening. The real problem is the connection of the same space machine's operation with support systems stretching for miles. A phone is not an object sending or receiving energy from another device. The program is like a node rearranging state signals within a single continuous space. What is moving here is not objects or packets, but simultaneous state changes occurring within space itself. Information does not behave as an independent thing, moving from one path to another. It is not transmitted between separate individuals. Instead, it is reshaped within a space already shared through communication. The moment we touch the screen, the data on the glass is not actually a takeover, but a specific change within this holistic field that occurred in the past. And because the field is singular, this change appears instantly, not with a delay elsewhere, but as a different expression of the same pattern. Here, distance loses its meaning. Because distance is only an idea that exists between separate and unconnected things. When technology begins to work in harmony with the fact that energy is a single, interconnected field, the distinction between here and there loses its function. What remains are different distributions, different conditions, and different points of interaction within the same field. Communication does not speed up. There is nothing to speed up anyway, because there is no path to take. Therefore, the real revolution lies not in pushing systems harder, in more power transfer, or in chasing higher speeds, but in remaining in harmony with the natural forms of energy. When you understand how the field behaves and move with it, resistance disappears, the flow changes. The current state of technology shows us this. As long as we include separate things in context, distances persist. When we learn in a single field, distance ceases to be a problem. Reality largely depends on what you expect to see. If something is impossible, even scenes right in front of you can become visible in your mind. It's like wearing sunglasses every day and questioning why everything is dark. Liberation isn't something that happens instantly. It requires practice. The first step is to begin to notice your automatic reactions. These are all essentially thoughts echoing within the walls of an old hospital. Look at the children. They're playing, and suddenly they're pirates, then astronauts, then doctors, or wrestlers. They do this without doubting themselves, without asking, could I be like that too? Because they haven't yet learned to limit their possibilities. This freedom exists within you. It hasn't disappeared. It's just hidden behind walls of doubt. And what you hear is filtered, showing only the allowed part of reality, not the whole thing. Stop and ask, is this really true? Or is it just a thought you've long been accustomed to believing? The walls of the prison of perception weren't built in a day. Therefore, they can't be expected to crumble in a day either. But questioning, experimenting a little, stepping outside your comfort zone creates a crack in the walls. Your true limits are far beyond what your mind whispers to you. Consider someone who inspires you, someone who has achieved what was called impossible. They face the same doubts, the same fears. The difference is that they chose not to stop, realizing that these walls weren't real. The prison guards aren't outside, they're inside. And by moving around the walls, they're revolutionizing the situation. While doubt, fear, and old classes may seem like weapons, the key was always in your hands. You can forge different relationships, take different actions, and write a different story. But this isn't a matter of positive thinking. It's a matter of the right subject. It's about knowing the perspectives of what's happening, not the shadows of your fears. When you do this, when you begin to notice the opportunities filtering through your mind, this prison room you thought was so solid is actually made of thoughts as thin as paper. With questions, curiosity, and small but courageous steps, these walls can be broken down. Structure the scope of your step a little more. This will show you with your own eyes what's possible, how you can tear down your own wall. The prison of perception is far larger than you think, and far more than your memory can hold. The door is already there, the walls ready to crumble. All that needs to be done is to take the first step. It is precisely at this point that the quantum mirror shows us something strange but instructive about how energy is expended. Consider a bathroom mirror. You live where you encounter it. But what if this mirror could show all the ways in which dimensional energy moves and changes? Imagine yourself bound before that mirror. Instead of a single reflection, countless images of the same moment are seen. In each reflection, the energy is slightly different. In one, heat rises from your body in red waves. In another, your nerves circulate electrical signals like blue guides. In yet another, the atoms within your manifestations vibrate. A visible dance begins. The same moment expresses itself again and again with different energy patterns. This mirror doesn't just show the present moment. Like waves crashing on a lake, it gives clues about what might happen in the future. Even the slightest change in energy gives rise to new patterns, new pathways, and new possibilities. Even a slight movement of your hand simultaneously reveals different programs through which the mirror energy can be observed. But the truly strange and evolving aspect of the situation is this. The mirror doesn't just show us these things, it also changes them. The moment we look into the mirror, the way energy moves begins to change. So we are only spectators. We are part of the process of our gaze itself. Scientists have noticed this when studying the smallest quantities. While particles behave like a sea of possibilities in their observations, when observed, they are forced to choose a single path. We can liken this to a shot. In everyday life, it's not easy to predict where a ball will go by looking at how hard you hit it. But in the quantum world, the ball can go in many directions at once. Looking at it forces you to choose just one point. So observation doesn't produce a result. It doesn't produce an outcome. The quantum mirror shows us this. We are not just watching. We are determining which possibility it will choose. When we measure something, when we try to control it, or when we try to understand exactly what it is, we change it. It's like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The act of reaching out itself distorts the shape of the smoke. Therefore, things often don't go as expected when we constantly try to forcefully control them. We're always in front of a mirror because we think we're outside the overall system. We can't pull the strings from the outside like a puppet master. We are inside the energy system that allows us to control it. Some energy-working people who realize this stop fighting it and learn to use it. Sometimes the most effective way to steer things differently is to step back and let the water find its own course. Harmony, not force, is beneficial. The mirror also shows us something unusual about time. Energy doesn't just flow forward. There's a simultaneous transition in every direction. Past and future intertwine. What emerges is not a straight line, but like a vibrant dance. Connections form in networks, and this radically changes our idea of controlling diversity. Instead of trying to force things into cells, you hear where the energy responds most to the most subtle touches. When we can read these patterns, it's important to discern moments that can create big effects on the small computer. Just like a crystal glass that vibrates and sings when you touch the right spot. It's not the force that matters here, but the details. And the mirror gives us one last lesson. Where we expect chaos, there is often surprising order. Like fractals in nature, the same patterns repeat at different scales. Tree branches are like small parts of the whole tree. Clouds form similarly, even if their sizes vary. Energy is random and unpredictable, yet profound. The quantum mirror isn't a physical mirror you can buy from a store or make at home. It's a way of looking at energy, understanding how we relate to it, how we interact with it when we observe and measure it. The rules of this mirror aren't rigid, punitive, and absolute like traffic rules. Rather, they're more like the visible patterns that allow birds to fly together in the sky despite conflict, or the natural principles that allow waves to crash against the shore in a different but harmonious way each time. When we try to control or forcibly alter energy, we look into this mirror without doing so. And what we see in the mirror isn't just energy. We see ourselves connected to everything through countless cause and effect chains. This perspective fundamentally changes our way of thinking because it allows us to stop seeing things as something unattainable, an object to be protected. We can no longer solve everything with mental effort. Instead of perceiving energy as a separate thing to be controlled, we begin to perceive it as part of our own natural properties, like a leaf drifting in a river. The leaf can't stop the current, but it can adjust its own direction somewhat. Yet it's not outside the river. Working with energy is similar. Instead of rejecting the flow, we learn to harmonize with it. Imagine that the next time you interact with energy, you are looking into your own quantum perspective. Look into that mirror. Notice the countless possibilities emanating from it. Observe how you shape what you see when you shift your state of attention. Remember that you are not just someone watching the dance of energy, but also a moving part of it. Because the act of watching itself creates what is being watched. This simple yet striking truth lies precisely here. This principle lies at the heart of quantum physics, but it often shapes our daily lives as well. Consider a child playing alone. They move freely, dance, talk, and daydream in their own world without looking at anyone. But the details of their actions suddenly change. They become more cautious, perhaps revealing themselves, perhaps concealing some of their movements. Observation, except for dispersion. The same mechanism works in our minds. The moment we begin to pay attention to our thoughts and feelings, they begin to change. A greeting takes on a different dispersion when we focus on it. Our breathing changes the moment we become aware of it. Our journey deviates from natural patterns when we begin to notice. So attention isn't just about noticing, it's also about shaping. And the quantum mirror reminds us of this. The change you make regarding something you want to change in your life remains that thing itself. Because you're not an outside observer, as you might think. You're at the very center of the system. Scientists notice this effect while studying tiny particles. The size of a particle changes, and its position within the measured quantity is distorted. Because the instruments used for observation altered what was being observed, it was impossible to know both at the same time and with certainty. So the problem wasn't in the measurement itself, but in the nature of the measurements. However, this doesn't only happen in physics laboratories. It's a standard practice in our principles. Consider a moment when you're overflowing with anger. When you're angry, you completely identify with it. The world seems harsher, people more threatening, events more personal. But then you withdraw and think, I'm wasting my anger right now. And something changes. The anger doesn't disappear. The energy is still there, but now you're lost in it. The observer emerges. This magical moment creates a fascinating opportunity. Because when we become aware of our patterns, our automatic responses, and our emotional chains, a small but very powerful link forms between stimulus and response. And freedom lies precisely here. We differentiate ourselves by not having to react, by being able to choose. Let's consider this with a concrete example. Consider a man on a first date with a random girl. His heart is pounding. His hands are sweating. His mind is constantly conjuring up scenarios. What if I say something wrong? What if you don't like it? What if there's silence? At this point, excitement, a burst of energy, kicks in. If he completely surrenders to this feeling, his body tenses, his tone of voice changes and becomes more natural. But if he also realizes, I'm excited right now, and that's normal, then the quantum mirror kicks in. The excitement is there, the energy continues, but it's no longer driven by fear, but by infinity. The threat of excitement disappears, transforming into vitality and passion. When the observer appears, the energy doesn't diminish, it transforms. The same is true for anxiety. When you realize you're starting to feel anxious, behaviors often follow a chain reaction. One fear begets another, then another. But the moment you notice this pattern, simply saying, "My mind is generating anxiety right now," is enough to break the chain. The same applies to prolonging events. Most of us clear our minds without shrugging, clenching our jaws, or holding our breath. The moment we realize this, we can't relax. without making a special effort. Because observation itself is an intervention. Just as in today's quantum world, seeing is change. But there's an important limitation here. As in the quantum realm, we can't observe our gaze directions simultaneously. Some details are lost, while others are hidden. Therefore, the goal isn't to control everything, it's to examine the right thing at the right time. And this is precisely where we understand. Mastery in life isn't about suppressing the sound. It's about the difference in speed and the delay in the amount of dance. When you observe, you see not a decrease in energy, but rather an increase in consciousness. Some experiences become clearer, while others diverge. This isn't a problem, because it's like turning the focus ring of a camera. There's no loss of clarity, only changes in position. And as we learn to direct our attention in the way we receive it, we can also decide which detail will appear before us. Here we come to a very practical, but often overlooked point. What should we observe? The answer is surprisingly profound. We should direct our attention to what we can change, are changing, or want to put at the center of our lives. If we want to break a habit, we look not at the performance itself, but at the moments that trigger it. If we want to spread a skill, we don't just continue. We pay attention to our patterns, pauses, and abandonments. If we want to change our schedules or ourselves, instead of trying to change the other person, we observe our own communication style, tone of voice, and moments of defensiveness. The key point is, observe without judgment. Observe not like a self-blaming judge, but like a calm scientist collecting data in the field. We see what's happening not through the filter of, it shouldn't have been like this, but with curiosity about what's really happening. Our expectation is that this temporary state of information will begin with an increase in change. Sometimes these changes are very subtle. An imperceptible relaxation in the shoulders, a half-second pause before speaking, a deepening of the breath. Sometimes they are much more obvious. A complete disruption of the game, a recurring cycle in a relationship, or taking a step that has long seemed impossible. Whatever the scale, all these transformations begin in the same place: observation. This brings us back to what we discussed at the beginning. A simple act of observation changes what we see. But now we can use this not unconsciously, but as a tool at home. Wherever and however we direct our attention, the ripple effect emerges without random side effects and becomes a controllable force. But ultimately, this is not just a strange feature of quantum physics or a theoretical hypothesis of psychology. It is a practical tool we can use every day. When you want to change something in your life, your first reflex is to force it. Instead, begin to move slowly, with curiosity and patience. Because attention is already creating the change, you are simply learning to anticipate it. In this dance between observer and observed, never just one moves, both transform simultaneously. The images that come to life in our minds shape our reality far more powerfully than we realize. Think of the mind as a screen constantly playing a film. These films tell us what we feel, how long we've been waiting, and how we see ourselves. And as we watch these films, our skin and our reality react by accepting them as real. Now let's look at two different mental films playing for the same situation. In the first film, you see yourself feeling disappointed when someone enters the crowd. Your mind immediately whispers, "I don't belong here." You feel the stares on you. Your heart races, your muscles tense, and anxieties overwhelm you even before you speak to anyone. Before anything actually happens, your mind seems to continue observing the dimension, and your body reacts to this film with energy. But there's a second version of the same scene. The same room, the same people, the same you. This time, the mental film says, "How much will I expand here?" No judgment, no script, just curiosity. Your body is more relaxed, your breathing more regular, your energy more balanced. The room hasn't changed. The people haven't. The only thing that's generally different is the internal image you're observing. And this small change transformed the tone of the entire experience from beginning to end. This is precisely where the ripple effect occurs. Reality isn't just the sum of what's happening outside. It's how we look at it, what we expect, and what movie we're watching, all happening live. Now, visualize a new scene in your mind and replay a different version of the same story from the beginning. This time, your shoulders are relaxed, your steps are more steady, your gaze is more lively, and you see the people in front of you communicating naturally, and the conversation deepening again without straining you. Changing this internal film can make you notice how your body feels more relaxed, how your breathing deepens, and how your energy flows more evenly. Because these mental films constantly run throughout the day without us being aware of them, shaping our emotions, attitudes, and behaviors. Often, these films are filled with traces of past experiences, colors we've been told over the years, and beliefs we've accepted as true about ourselves. But the key to change is this: if we are forced to be merely spectators of this film, we can learn to control it if we want to. Imagine you catch a negative scenario in your mind. For example, think of a situation you are about to talk about. Your mind constantly conjures up a scene as if you are being watched and scrutinized by people. At that very moment, you can stop this film, take a step back, take a deep breath, and continue to exist. Then, with a choice, you can create a new scene where your voice is clear, your body language is calm, and the people in front of you are truly listening. Self-improvement policies, because they are often artificial and unsustainable, cannot be consistently supported positively. What matters is which films are watched and how those films disrupt the preservation of your emotions and energy. Some may think this is just imagination, but research shows that the brain responds to mental rehearsals in a way very similar to real experience. The boundary between a vividly imagined event and an event actually experienced is not as sharp as we think. Therefore, athletes mentally rehearse their movements before stepping onto the field and improve their performance. Orchestra musicians are sensitive to the flow of their fingers on the instrument and the power of the note during rehearsal. They mentally visualize a physical posture by feeling the audience's energy before the scene ends. Chess players also test their moves with mental simulations. What they have in common is that when they learn to manage their internal films, their emotions, passions, and energies align in the same direction. And the real transformation begins here, in these small but powerful choices made in the world. Just as chess masters mentally play the entire game from start to finish, anticipating their opponent's possible moves and their own strategies, or surgeons mentally rehearse each step of a complex operation to keep their hands calm and their minds clear, you can use the same principle to shape your own energy, decisions, and reactions. Because when a process is imagined clearly and consistently enough, the brain begins to perceive it as an experience ready to happen. The key here is to visualize the outcome so vividly and realistically in your mind when making a decision or taking action in any given situation that your brain begins to act as if that outcome is already happening. However, it is especially important to remember that this process is not simply about saying, "Think positive." The key is not to create random rosy fantasies, but to create believable mental films that have a counterpart in real life. For example, when learning a new skill, instead of thinking you will be perfect on your first try, it is far more effective to imagine that you are progressing step by step, facing challenges from time to time, but becoming more skilled each time. Now try this concretely. Imagine a situation approaching that usually makes you tense, and pay attention to what comes to mind. Watch the movie your mind automatically plays. Don't try to jump to a perfect scenario right away. Just make a small adjustment. If you see yourself as a complete failure, transform that scene into a version where you can manage the situation, even if everything isn't perfect. If you imagine others harshly criticizing you, make those looks neutral or even slightly supportive. Make these new mental movies as detailed as possible. What do you see around you? What sounds do you hear? How do the sensations in your body change? The more senses you include in the scene, the more real and convincing it becomes for the brain. Try playing these improved versions over and over again. When you do this several times a day, you're not actually fooling yourself. You're training your brain to take new possibilities seriously, to evaluate them, and to make room for them. Over time, this practice changes your energy field. As you watch more supportive mental movies, your nervous system calms down. Your body language softens, and you begin to send completely different signals to your surroundings. These signals reach others, and often, external reality surprisingly begins to align with these new mental films you've created in your mind. Remember those times when you worried about something for hours, creating detailed disaster scenarios in your head. Realize how much energy was wasted. Now imagine using that same mental energy for scenarios that support you and move you forward. You're not claiming that challenges will never arise. You're simply consciously choosing where to direct your mental energy. The goal isn't to never have negative thoughts, but to realize that when you do, you have a choice about which mental film to play and which one to feed over and over again. To easily find the next video, you need to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.